Ever since I was little, my grandmother has been a talkative and nurturing person. People always seem to gather around her. She has this mysterious charm. My husband, who dared to mess with Grandma Bitch Money, finds himself under her mysterious spell. So much so, he's scared stiff to even come near us. My name is Susan. I've been married to Alex for 2 years now, and we've been blessed with a child we longed for. I wanted a baby right away after getting married, but due to differences in perspective with my husband, it took us 2 years to finally start trying. From the beginning, Alex isn't that keen on having kids. It's not that he hates kids or anything. He just wanted to cherish our time as a couple first. We're both young, so I felt there was no need to rush. We agreed to wait until both of us felt ready. But about 6 months ago, Alex suddenly became enthusiastic about having a baby. Soon after, I found myself pregnant. I was thrilled, of course, but I couldn't help wondering why the sudden change. When I asked him, he said he got worried after hearing about a female acquaintance who became unable to have children due to illness. We're both still young and he's healthy, but Alex felt that wouldn't last forever. So, wanting to avoid future regrets, he thought we should have a child while we're still young and healthy. In fact, his acquaintance deeply regretted not having children before she fell ill. It was enough to make us feel that waiting for the right time could be too late. Normally, stories like this seem far removed. You might see them on the internet and think they don't concern you. But when it happens to someone you know, it suddenly feels real. That's why I also agreed with Alex. So here I am, pregnant and overjoyed. Though we'd just hurried a bit due to these circumstances, I was already looking forward to giving birth. My husband, his parents, as well as my mom and grandma, who live back in my hometown, were all looking forward to the day the new addition to our family. A few months into my pregnancy, with only a month left until my due date, my grandma and mom suggested I come home for the birth. My grandmother is really pushing for me to go back to my hometown to give birth, and she's been quite insistent about it. I want to see my first great-grandchild as soon as possible. Think of it as a gift to an old woman whose days are numbered. My grandma uses that line a lot. How many times have I heard her say her days are numbered? The funny thing is, she's now past 90 and bedridden. You're my husband, now even more afraid of Grandma, has agreed to let me give birth in my hometown. The funny thing is, she always seems so energetic that it's hard to deal with her. But it's also true that I have a soft spot for my grandmother's requests. I won't have much more time to spend with her, but with that in mind, I decided to honor my grandmother's wishes. To my grandmother's strong wishes, I decided to go back to my hometown for childbirth. However, convincing my husband turned out to be quite a struggle. My grandma has an outspoken personality and doesn't hold back. Even though she's bedridden and over 90, she's still full of vitality and enjoys chatting with neighbors who drop by. Her unforgiving words and actions, which stem from that kind of personality, don't discriminate. They affect me, her granddaughter, and my husband just the same. says on top of making unnervingly confident statements. My husband seems to be a bit uncomfortable around my grandmother. Going back to my hometown, where my formidable grandmother resides, for the birth of our child didn't seem to sit well with my husband. Maybe that's why, when I told my husband I wanted to go back to my hometown to give birth, he was hesitant and took quite a while to give me the nod. But it was also my grandmother who managed to influence my husband's actions. In conversations with my husband, Grandma would always use her advancing age as a shield, just like she usually does. She used her age as leverage, saying, "What will you do if I don't get to see my great-grandchild?" So he finally gave in, making Grandma yet again the driving force in our decisions. I couldn't help but chuckle at the situation. My husband often has to travel for work and isn't around much. Even without considering my grandmother, I felt more secure choosing to have my baby back in my hometown. Once I returned to my childhood home after so long, I was reminded of how well my grandmother is doing. Ever since my father and grandfather passed away, it's been just my grandmother and my mom living together. Their relationship seems wonderful. My chatty grandmother and my smiling mother listening to her really epitomize a mother-daughter relationship. Though my grandmother is on my father's side and not actually related by blood to my mom, their relationship is as trusting as any. I even find myself a little envious of their close-knit relationship. But what surprised me even more was the number of visitors my grandmother receives. People have been coming to see her since I lived at home, but even now that she's bedridden, the visits haven't stopped. Plus, all sorts of people are stopping by my childhood home every day. The age range is quite diverse, with folks as young as me all the up to people around my grandmother's age. It was actually my grandmother who brought my husband and me together in the first place. And having witnessed scenes like this from my childhood, I thought I was used to this scene. But seeing it again made me really appreciate it. My grandmother always speaks her mind, and let's just say her choice of words isn't exactly polished, but she always chooses them carefully and never averts her insecurities. That attitude probably contributes to her character, which has earned her admiration even as her health has declined. Till life with my charismatic grandmother and caring mom has been comfortable, and I've enjoyed peaceful days since returning to my hometown. Weeks have passed since I returned, and my due date was quickly approaching.
Catherine, don't go back to your old home after giving birth. Nothing good will come of it. Stay here. She looked at me intensely.
Since my grandmother gazes at me intently, her serious expression unwavering, I could only make an ambiguous expression in return. She went to sleep soon after, so I immediately consulted my mother, who advised me with a smile to listen to her words.
Your grandma has a peculiar intuition. Maybe she sensed something bad. You should listen to her.
I can't help but feel uneasy when I see my mom smiling with a look of utter conviction. However, I find it hard to believe such an incredibly unreal story. I figured my grandmother was just dreading my departure and made that comment. Perhaps my mom was also looking out for her feelings, I decided to think of it that way and talk to my husband about it later that night. Then my husband exclaims, "Well, that's surprising. That's unusual. Your Mill making a joke like that," he said. "Right? It was definitely surprising." We both laughed it off, and I soon forgot about it. Days later, on my due date, I gave birth without any issues. Unfortunately, my husband couldn't be there due to work, but it's been arranged that he will pick us up once the baby and I are settled. For the time being, we've decided to stay at my parents' home. Just a little while later, my husband did come to pick up me and our daughter as promised. However, my mother had already turned him away without my knowledge. I was unaware of all this. I received a text from my husband asking, "Your Mile just told me to go back. Do you know why?"
Your mom just told me to go back. Do you know why?
I had no idea and was just as puzzled. So I immediately asked my mother and grandmother for an explanation.
I told you so, didn't I? You're better off not going back. So, I asked Alex to leave.
My grandmother responded, seemingly unfazed. I thought that remark at that time was some kind of joke or something, but I never imagined that my grandmother was saying it seriously. Regardless, I couldn't simply accept this and protested, but neither my grandmother nor my mother would listen. Not only that, both of them tried to convince me, "I just know you're going to regret it if you go back. Just listen to me," says my mother. She claims to know this through my grandmother's mysterious powers. As if I would believe such nonsense, I'm worried that Grandma may be losing her marbles, especially when Mom is nodding seriously. I'm completely confused.
Alex will be visiting again during the next holiday. Hear him out then. If you still want to go back, you're free to do so. However, Grandma insists that only she will speak to my husband when you comes to pick me up, and I'm not allowed to interfere. I'm also forbidden from contacting him until he arrives.
Although I feel like this is some sort of charade, neither Grandma nor Mom is joking. Their expressions are serious. I realize that arguing further won't change their minds, so reluctantly, I agree to Grandma's proposal. A few days later, as promised, my husband arrives at my parents' home. I greet him casually and invite him inside. It's been a month since we last saw each other. He seems a bit tense, perhaps because he was turned away last time. Other than that, there were no changes in his demeanor. He returned to his grandmother and mother's home just as he was. Mom is holding our newborn daughter. My husband reaches out to her. Grandma stops him.
There's something we need to clarify first. Grandma states perplexing my husband.
Noticing her husband acting all uptight, Grandma told him to relax and then started making small talk as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Is Sarah doing well? At this seemingly innocent question, my husband's face turns ashen, probably a woman's name. I have no idea who this Sarah is, but my husband looks shocked, ignoring our reactions. Grandma continues at her small talk.
You two went shopping at a department store in front of the station yesterday, didn't you?
Did you find the baby items you were looking for? At his grandmother's words, the husband's eyes widen in sheer astonishment. his face breaking out in sweat. I, on the other hand, am utterly confused. I don't know who this woman is, let alone why my husband would be shopping for baby items with her. Echoing my puzzled expression, my husband, struggling to find the words, asks,
How do you know about this?
Grandma replies cheerfully. My husband looks at Grandma as if she's speaking gibberish. He murmurs, X makes no sense, but Grandma's next words leave him speechless.
Sarah had a hysterectomy due to her illness, right? So she can't get pregnant. Why then are you buying baby items? Do you have another plan to have a child?
My husband lowers his head and says nothing. I do remember my husband mentioning a friend who can't have children due to an illness. Likely, this Sarah is that person. Etchy, yet why would she need baby items? And why would my husband help her shop for them? I have a bad feeling about this, and it's making me uneasy.
Wouldn't you rather confess now than regret it later?
Anma advises, upon hearing this, my husband lifts his face and looks at me. In a soft voice, he quietly reveals the shocking truth.
I was planning to divorce you after bringing home our child today.
Listening to this calmly delivered plan, a sense of dread filled me for my husband. He had been considering remarriage with a woman named Sarah, who couldn't have children due to a medical condition. Feeling pity for her, he had thought about using our child as a substitute. After all, the child does share his blood, which he figured was better than adopting a stranger's child. He consulted Shiori and then became actively involved in trying to get me pregnant. The child we eventually had was the one he planned to pick up today. Basically, he didn't care about me. He just wanted the child. I felt a chilling fear with every word he methodically uttered. My husband standing right in front of me feels like an incomprehensible and creepy entity. At the same time, an indescribable anger welled up within me.
No matter the situation, you're not taking my great-grandchild.
My husband visibly shuddered under my grandmother's stern gaze. Like the antsy teen, I had almost forgotten, but my grandma's mysterious power seemed to see right through everything. It made sense that my husband would feel terror in front of this enigmatic woman. Got it. If you lay a finger on my granddaughter or great-grandchild again, you won't get off easy. My grandmother leaned slightly forward from her bed and added, I'll curse you with this mystical power of mine. My husband's knees gave out, and he scurried out of the house, sobbing. Later, I expressed my gratitude to my grandmother and mother and shared my all about this mystical power. Powers. They said holding their stomachs. There's no such thing as mystical powers. They said holding their stomachs. That's in reality. My grandmother had just gathered information from reliable sources. My husband's parents had noticed his shady plans and consulted with my grandmother a while before I went back to my hometown for childbirth. She had used her wide network to investigate him. She led me to believe in this mystical power to get my husband to spill the beans. They believed that once my husband saw my grandmother as an enigmatic figure, he would cease causing problems for me and our child in the future. With that in mind, it seems they had been quietly advancing this plan without telling me. As a result, her scheme was a roaring success. My husband didn't gripe one bit about alimony or child support, and everything was settled smoothly. He insisted on giving me full custody of the kids, and we were able to get divorced without a hitch. I believe all of this went smoothly thanks to some mysterious power that my grandmother and mom came up with. I couldn't help but wonder if this mystical power might actually exist after all. There's no such thing as mystical powers, they said, holding their stomachs. In reality, my grandmother had just gathered information from reliable sources. My husband's parents had noticed his shady plans and consulted with my grandmother a while before I went back to my hometown for childbirth. She had used her wide network to investigate him. She led me to believe in this mystical power to get my husband to spill the beans. They believed that once my husband saw my grandmother as an enigmatic figure, he would cease causing problems for me and our child in the future. With that in mind, it seems they had been quietly advancing this plan without telling me. As a result, her scheme was a roaring success. My husband didn't gripe one bit about alimony or child support, and everything was settled smoothly. He insisted on giving me full custody of the kids, and we were able to get divorced without a hitch. I believe all of this went smoothly thanks to some mysterious power that my grandmother and mom came up with. I couldn't help but wonder if this mystical powers might actually exist after all.